Because I just can't. Hello and welcome back to my channel, or just welcome if you're new. My name is Victoria and today I'm going to be talking about Warstorm by Victoria Aveyard. As I'm sure you've noticed, I'm wearing my dragon onesie. Because I just can't with this book, and it's the only way I'm gonna get through it. If you haven't heard of this book, this is the final installment in the Red Queen series by Victoria Aveyard, which follows Mare Barrow in a dystopian fantasy world in which society is divided by blood type, silver-blooded people being those with superpowers, and red-blooded people being those they've oppressed because they have no powers, so they're seen as lesser. Mare represents a third branch of the evolutionary tree, which is red-blooded people that also have superpowers that are even more powerful than the silvers. So Mare has been, for the course of these 4 books, on a journey to overthrowing the government and trying to institute a new, more equal world. It's kind of like Hunger Games meets Game of Thrones meets X-Men, so it's amazing. You should read them if you haven't. Before I really get into my book talk, I'll just share a few non-spoilery thoughts. This book was everything that I hoped it would be. The beginning was a little slow. I did find the first like 200 pages a bit like, get me into the story already! But I don't know if you guys saw my Warstorm wish list. A lot of the things that I wished would happen happened, so I was just like, it was everything that I wanted in the conclusion to this series, like honestly. It was very satisfying and rewarding and a very fitting end to everything that had been going on in the rest of the series. So I was very happy and emotional, as always. That being said, I'm gonna get into my more spoilery thoughts now, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then you should leave now. Bye! This review is not gonna be structured by any like proper examination of the story or the plot. It's really just gonna be like me fangirling over certain parts of the book and like things that I enjoyed. Because I just can't! The first thing that I want to mention is Evangeline. Somehow she's become my favorite character of this entire series. Like in the beginning I was all ugh, mostly because she didn't really do much but antagonize Mare. But somehow she's become so awesome. Like her journey to accepting herself is so beautiful, but also like just the sass coming out of this girl's mouth. Like I wrote down a few of her quotes because I was dying laughing. Like I was reading this in the mall before I went to the signing for the book series, and so I was just sitting there like cackling to myself and people kept giving me weird looks. So on page 207, when she says Mare is full of hysterical nonsense. On page 250, when she calls Cal chronologically impaired. Page 496, when she calls Cal dramatic. And then, in a spur of the moment emotional scene, when her and Cal are talking about whether they should choose duty or the heart, and she goes after Elaine, and then her and Cal are talking and she's like, it's not too late for you either. I'm like, where did this come from? Like, how did you get so deep? Oh my gosh. So yeah, fangirling seriously, Evangeline is my new hero. Out of nowhere, too. Another thing I wanted to talk about is Mare in this book, because one thing I've really enjoyed about this series is how Victoria Aveyard really, like, digs into the psychological effect of war and trauma. And so in Glass Sword, we saw Mare just, like, completely being a robot, unable to process anything. And then King's Cage, she's tortured and abused even more, develops Stockholm Syndrome, and then finally escapes, and, like, by the end, slowly puts herself back together. And so what we see in this book is really just her like processing in a really healthy way. And so if you guys remember at the end of King's Cage, Cal chooses the throne over Mare and she's all like, screw all y'all, I'm gonna go fight a rebellion without you. And so what you see in this book is like this really beautiful way of her processing where she's like willing to recognize that she misses him and it's hard, but at the same time she's still fighting for her cause, but not like you saw in the previous books where she was just throwing herself into it because she was an emotional wreck. But now she really believes in it, but at the same time she's recognized it's okay to be vulnerable and she can still miss Cal and still love Cal, but like sometimes she still needs to do other things. So it was just very beautiful. For example, on page 469, this is Mare's perspective. In Corvium, when he chose the crown, I thought the world had been snatched away, leaving me to fall through an abyss. This isn't the same. My heart has already been broken, and one night did not sew it back together. One night meaning the one night that they slept together. This wound isn't new, this ache isn't unfamiliar. Cal is the person he told me he was. Nothing and no one will ever change him. I can love him, and perhaps always will, but I can't make him move when he decides to stay still. The same could be said of me. Like, oh, my baby, healthy processing. Just so beautiful. And I just love that because it's like coming to recognize that we're all flawed and like you love someone in spite of their flaws, but ultimately like you can't control them. All you can do is control yourself, and she's realizing that and coming to a place where she can control herself in a healthy way rather than closing everything off and like stifling her emotions or letting them all loose and going crazy. On that note, the next thing I want to talk about is Cal's final choosing of her. I'm so happy. I mean, part of me wanted Cal to die, but like also it's just so beautiful how like his own arc is like, this is who I am, this is who I was made to be, blah 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 blah, and then like coming to a place where he can decide for himself like who he really wants to be and what's really important, and the things that he was fighting for are actually better fought for if he takes himself out of the equation. And I was like, it's just so good. And now him and Mare can live happily ever after, which, as you know, in the ending they kind of don't, but it's hinted. And she puts, oh my gosh, when she puts the little earring in, and it's Cal's earring because she's got like all her brothers, right? And then she takes it out when they break up, but then she puts it in and it's like he's part of her now, and like maybe one day they'll be together. Oh, and on that note, how she ends up alone, like that was what I wanted more than anything. Like this is one thing the Hunger Games did really well, when it's like you've had so much trauma and like you're trying to put yourself back together, like you need time, and it's not healthy to just immediately like throw yourself into a relationship with someone to fix you. And so like Hunger Games took several years for her and Peeta to be together, and like in this one it's implied that it's gonna be that way because she goes her separate way and she goes to be with her family, which is also what I wanted, because that's been such a huge part of this series, is like how important her family is to her. And so I was so glad that at the end she decides to like set war aside, because I don't think that Mare is kind of a born warrior. I think that she learns to fight because she's good at surviving, but like innately it did more damage to her, whereas like I feel like Cal is a born warrior. Like he thrives when he can fight for something, whereas I think Mare, as much as she's capable of it, is like actually more gentle and like needs her family. So I was so happy that she went off with her family, and like her and Cal were like, well, we're not gonna be together, but maybe one day. And I was like, this is just the perfect ending. Like this is what I needed. Such good writing and like such a good insight into like healthy human emotions and like how we actually function. Kind of backtracking, I also loved how even though they like broke up and decided they were gonna fight for separate causes, how they still ended up sleeping together a few times, but like not making promises. As much as that's not necessarily the healthy option, I felt like it was very realistic considering their situation and their feelings and how humans function. So I thought that was a really good element as well. Moving on, let's talk about Maven. As you guys probably know if you read this, Maven dies. I was seriously hoping for a redemption arc. I didn't think it was gonna happen because the series is so realistic, and I was like, that would kind of undo the themes that she's been building the entire series. But like, I still wanted it to happen. I wanted something to hope for. And he died. That was actually the one part of the story that I didn't like. Not that he died, because I think that that was accurate with the themes and the stuff that Victoria Aveyard was building through the story, but I didn't really like how Mare killed him. I don't know. I would love to know your guys' thoughts. Like, was that foreshadowed? How did that seem for you? Because it kind of seemed to me like, especially through this book when Maven was taunting her, like, kill me, and it was kind of implied that if she killed him, like, she would be just as bad as him. And that was kind of his way of controlling her, like, basically saying, if I can't be with you or, like, have you, then you should be the one to kill me, because then I know my memory will haunt you forever because you'll be so guilty. I don't know, maybe that was supposed to be foreshadowing, but it seemed to me like when she said no to executing him, she was finally kind of, like, letting him go in a healthy way and being like, no, you don't own me, and you can't control me, and you won't haunt me after this. And so the fact that she killed him then later, I mean, it was in war, it wasn't execution out of rage, it wasn't the same thing, but like, I don't know, I still feel like that was kind of undoing like the healthy decision that she made. And like, I know she had to go after him, not Cal, because Cal wouldn't have had the strength to kill him, but like at the same time, I don't know, I kind of thought once he escaped and Mare had made that decision and Cal had made it clear he couldn't kill him, that actually Maven would get away. The series would end with him like off by himself, like leaving the ties unfinished. I didn't actually think he was gonna die once we got to that place where Mare was like, no, I'm not killing you, and then he escaped. So that was kind of the one aspect I didn't like. I mean, not that it made me not like the book or like I was mad at it, it just, I didn't quite see it coming, and it wasn't like a pleasant surprise. It was more like I didn't feel like it fit necessarily with what had been developed, but that was just me, so I would love to know your guys' thoughts on it. But I did think that his death scene was very well executed in terms of how she wrote it, and like Mare's feelings throughout the whole thing, and like, yeah, just the whole kind of ambiguity when you're like, did he die? I don't know, and then you find out later because she blacks out. So yeah, that felt really realistic, and like both of their feelings through that whole thing. Maven's sick desire to like kill or be killed, and oh my gosh, on that note, just made me so sad. Like anytime we were in Maven's brain, I'd well up, like not actually crying but close to it. It's just so depressing because he's just so twisted, and like you can just tell there's like something in him that wants to be freed of that, but like he's been so damaged by his mom, and it's just so depressing. In the earlier books it just grossed me out and I was like, I hate you, but by this point I was like, it's just really depressing. And then like the point when Mare kills him and the line is something like his eyes were sad but also like relieved relieved or something. The fulfillment of his thoughts to his mother throughout the story, like crown or nothing. And so like he's finally like, well, I didn't get the crown, but now I've got nothing, so I'm finally like fulfilled. And I'm just like, it's so sad. Cut my soul apart. On another note, oh my gosh, John though, am I right? Am I right? I said in my wish list, like I really wanted John to like reappear and say that he did like one small action which set the whole thing in motion, because up until this book we weren't sure like which side he was fighting for, and he seemed very like self-interested, but I was like, I suspect that actually he's a good guy and he's just allying himself with certain people at certain times to like let the whole thing play out. So when you find out that he killed Killorn's master to set the whole thing in motion, and I was like, oh my gosh, I knew it, and I'm so pleased. Backtracking because I forgot to mention, page 476, when Mare asks Maven, what do I deserve? And he's like, better than we ever gave you. I'm like, knife right in the heart, Victoria, why? There are just so many more amazing things that I could talk about, but just the writing itself was so good. Like when Julian tells Cal, like, the crown is not your father. It's such a good line. Like it's deep, but also like it just so encompasses like everything that Cal is struggling with. And then Maven saying that Cal has been created too, and this whole theme that we've all been influenced and built by somebody else, and nobody is a completely autonomous being. Like ever since we're born, who we are is so intrinsically tied to our experiences with the people around us, and like how that's literally manifest in Maven, but then also how that's true of everyone. When Mare says something like, I am not a ruin, like no matter what has happened to me, I can go on. Just because I feel pain and I'm a mess doesn't mean that I'm broken or beyond repair. And then how that parallels the very ending when she says we rebuild, like we're so good at destroying, but also we rebuild. Like that's the beauty of humanity. Like yes, sometimes we're terrible and we do a lot of horrible things, but like it's not all darkness. We rebuild and we heal. And it was just the perfect ending, and I just love it. Okay, so I filmed my Warstorm review ages ago, and I'm about to film another book talk, but I totally forgot to mention two things that I wanted to say. First of all, Mare dyed her hair. Yas, queen! And secondly, normally in these reviews, I do a little segment called Inquillery's Inquiries, where I just kind of poke fun at plot holes by asking questions, but I wanted to mention I couldn't even come up with anything. That's how good Warstorm was, so that's why there is no Inquillery's Inquiries in this video, and it's just that good, so go read it. There's so much more to be said because this book was so freaking long. 657 pages, but I don't want to go on forever. Those were kind of the highlights for me and the things that I wanted to geek out about, so there you go. I would love to hear your thoughts below, as always. Thank you so much for watching. Maybe I should throw a funeral for Maven. Is that too morbid? I need help. On that note, I love you all very much. Bye! That being...